Come on, I'll drop you home. Are you sure you'll be able to drive? Yeah, don't worry. Tonight was fun. Well, the night hasn't ended yet. Why don't we go back to my place? You know I can't, Calvin. I have to get home. Just an hour. Let me turn around the car. No, Calvin. All right. I was just messing with you. Calvin! How is she? She's gone into a coma. Will she be all right? We're hoping for the best. Her vitals are returning to normal. This is Calvin Johnson. He's the man who saved your daughter. If you hadn't brought her in time, things could have gone terribly wrong. We don't know how to thank you. Adele Weston. She is the only child of Jonathan and Leslie Weston. She is their everything. And seeing her battling for her life, they were devastated. They had nothing but gratitude towards Calvin for saving their daughter's life. For days, Mr. and Mrs. Weston waited by Adele's side. And finally, on the third day, Adele opened her eyes. Sweetheart, how are you feeling? Where am I? You're at the hospital. You were in an accident. Who are you? Adele, I'm your mother. Adele? I don't know you people. Adele has traumatic brain injury, which caused her to suffer amnesia, memory loss. Will her memory return? It will take time, Mrs. Weston. You'll have to trigger her past memories. Mr. and Mrs. Weston tried their best to cope with Adele's condition. But for Adele, they were nothing more than strangers. Adele, meet Calvin. He's the man who saved your life. Do you remember anything that happened that night? That night? No, I can't remember anything. Perhaps with time, you'll remember. These are for you. Daffodils? How did he know Adele likes daffodils? Everyone likes daffodils, Jonathan. After a week in the hospital, Adele was discharged. Returning home, Mr. and Mrs. Weston desperately hoped seeing her room, her things, would trigger her memory. but nothing. Adele was nothing like she was before. She was quiet. She stayed by herself. She never reacted to the small things she used to love or hate before. But Mr. and Mrs. Weston didn't lose hope. It was one of these days. Mrs. Weston was surprised to hear Adele sing from her balcony. "Jonathan, come here." "Is that Adele?" The parents joined their daughter, amazed by her talent. "You have such a nice voice, dear." It was beautiful. "Did I used to sing before?" "We've never heard you sing like this before. In fact, you never even showed any interest towards singing. It came naturally to me." After a long time, Mr. and Mrs. Weston noticed a change in Adele. She seemed happy. She enjoyed singing. So Mr. Weston thought to encourage Adele in her new hobby and introduced her to a friend of his who owned a production studio. "Her voice is incredible. He's going to make it far, Jonathan." Before long, Adele recorded her own album at the studio. "Dad, do you have Calvin's number?" "Calvin? Why?" "I want to thank him and give him a record of my album." "Here." "Thanks." Why is she taking so much interest in him? He's so much older than her. Jonathan, he saved her life. Maybe she feels she owes him. Ever since the accident, Adele hasn't really gone out or been with her friends. Much of the time, the parents could sense she was depressed. She would stay hours on end in the shower. "Adele? Adele, dear, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Mr. Weston didn't really like Adele meeting up with Calvin so much, but Adele seemed to connect with this man. And Mr. Weston was ready to do anything to bring Adele back to normal. Within a month, the studio got Adele's album aired. And as they expected, her talent immediately got recognized. Adele's album made the list, and soon, she started getting offers to perform at shows. Almost overnight, Adele became a new sensation. Horrible. What were you thinking? She has the worst voice. You're never going to be a singer. It's not in you. Mid-show, Adele left the stage. No one knew where she went. She didn't pick up any calls or texts. Where could she have gone? I'll go out and search for her. I'll help. Mr. Weston and Calvin rode through town for hours, but he couldn't find his daughter. It wasn't until near midnight, Calvin stopped his car by the lakeside, spotting Adele sitting by the rocks. Adele? What are you doing here? Everyone has been searching for you. We were so worried. The water. So cold. Calvin realized Adele was freezing. He quickly gave her his jacket and got her into the car. Let's go home, Adele. I can't do this anymore. Do what? Perform in front of people. You've been under stress. You need to rest now. We'll talk about this later. Calvin took Adele home that night. Mr. and Mrs. Weston could sense something wasn't right. Their daughter was quiet. She took medicine and went to bed. The vision, it felt so real, so devastating. Look, Adele, the attention is getting to you. Big stars get nervous performing in front of people, but you'll get used to it. Calvin tried to be there for Adele. But over the days, Adele's strange behavior, her distance from everyone increased. And soon, things started to take a dark turn. Adele? Have you been drinking? You're only 17. This is unacceptable. I'm old enough to make my own decisions. Don't tell me what to do. Adele not only began drinking, but she completely disregarded Mr. and Mrs. Weston. Nothing they said mattered to her. Calvin himself was surprised by her change. It was one of these nights. He got a text from her. I'm at the studio. Meet me on the rooftop. For some reason, Calvin got a bad feeling at the pit of his stomach. He immediately drove out to the studio. Adele? Adele was silent. She stared at him, a strange look in her eyes. What's going on, Adele? Tell me, is something bothering you? I was alive. Why did you throw me into the lake? What? Calvin. He is no stranger to Adele, and the night of the accident was not the first time they had met. Calvin and Adele had met at a college convention a few months ago. And although Adele was 17 and he was 27, they connected and secretly started dating. And that night, it was on Adele's insistence, Calvin managed a fake ID for her and took her to a club. They had a fun night, and the plan was to drop her back home before Mr. and Mrs. Weston find out. It's getting late, and it's gonna start pouring anytime now. I have to go. That night, on the way back home, Calvin was not in his senses, unable to pay attention to the road. Calvin! He crashed into a woman, and when he came to his senses, he was devastated seeing what happened. The woman was badly injured, and Adele was unconscious. Calvin panicked. He didn't know what to do. He was drunk driving. He had an underage girl in his car. And now, this woman. He didn't know if she would live. Trying to save himself, that night, Calvin threw the woman's body in the lake from the bridge and brought Adele to the hospital, staging the whole incident to his favor. Everyone thought Adele survived that night, but no one knew what happened with Hazel. Hazel. She was from a middle-class family. She had a passion for singing from her childhood. She had the knowledge of music. She knew all the notes. She practiced all the techniques. But it was unfortunate. Hazel lacked the talent. She didn't have a good voice. Horrible. What were you thinking? She has the worst voice. You're never going to be a singer. It's not in you. Hazel faced rejection over and over again. But she tried hard not to give up on her passion. Until life got in the way and she had to do what she had to do to survive. Eventually, Hazel found herself working odd jobs, and her dream of becoming a singer forever remained unfulfilled. And on that fateful night, everything changed. That night, something strange happened that has no explanation. It was not Hazel who lost her life. It was Adele. Calvin had dropped Hazel's body into the frigid cold waters while she was unconscious. Somehow, fate had a way of returning her in a body where she could fulfill her lifelong dream. Adele never understood her connection with music, but her beautiful natural voice, with Hazel's knowledge of music, gave birth to a new star. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.